Driving on the ice. I don't know how many of you have lived in climates where it snows or where the weather gets very cold and ice is a concern. If you ever lived in the Midwest, or even in the North, on the Northeast coast, you've probably experienced what I'm going to talk about. Several years ago, we lived in Pennsylvania, in a town called Altoona. Altoona was an interesting town in that it was built around rail yards, and it had a big changing station for trains to come into. So many of the neighborhoods were built on triangles. Instead of having streets like in most cities that are parallel to each other and then perpendicular with a lot of streets running east and west or north and south, these streets would make a triangle. It was a very odd shape. For any of you who are from Pennsylvania, you know what I'm talking about. But this is how Altoona was set up. Well, we lived in Altoona, and I worked at a college that was in Cresson. Cresson was a little small community up on Cresson Mountain. It was probably about 30 miles. Well, between 25 and 30 miles from Altoona to Cresson. And I would drive up and down the mountain. The first year we lived there, we rented a house in Altoona while we looked for a house to buy in this small community on the mountain. Houses up there were hard to find because most people didn't move out once they moved in. During that year, I would drive up and down frequently. Well, one morning, I was going up fairly early to work, and we had an ice storm the night before. We had what's called black ice, and if any of you are familiar with this, it means the roads are clear where you can see the asphalt, and the ice forms on top of it. You don't even know it's there necessarily because you can't see it. I was driving up the mountain when I hit a patch of ice. My car probably spun around 3 times. I went from my side of the highway to the other side before I stopped. I'm sure I made 3 complete rotations. It was very, very frightening. Fortunately for me, no one was coming. No one was behind me. No one was going down the mountain. Or I'm sure it would have been a very nasty accident. It was one of those things that not all pieces of the road have ice, so you're not aware that it's there. And I just hit a patch and lost control of the car. It's kind of when you're hydroplaning, you know you're stuck and you can't get traction. So you just have to go with the flow of it. Recently, one of our daughters moved to North Carolina, and this had been her first experience driving on both snow and ice. We cautioned her a while back. You be careful because you will hit patches of black ice where you're driving. It's just fine, and then all of a sudden you hit one of these pieces and you don't have control over your car. The best thing to do is always to drive slowly and give yourself plenty of space between cars. You know, the same thing is true with ice. No, not ice, with snow. You can get stuck in the snow, unlike ice, where you can lose control and end up just circling. With a car on the snow, you can get your tires stuck in it and can't get any traction. This also happened to me when we lived in Pennsylvania. My husband went out and shoveled the driveway for me one morning. While I was backing out, I got too close where he had shoveled this pile of snow. I got the back wheel stuck in it, and I couldn't get out. He had to come out and re-shovel the driveway. He wasn't very happy with me. Part of this is just if you don't have any way to get traction on packed snow. It can be very much like ice. This is why so often in the Northeast or even in the Midwest, you'll see people who put sandbags in their trunk to weigh down the back end of their car in the winter. So if they get stuck, the weight will help with traction. And it can also be useful if you do what I did. Sometimes when people get stuck, they get out and put sand around their tires, which will give them enough traction to get out of the snow. So I caution any of you, if you've never had this experience and you move to a location where snow and ice occur on a fairly routine basis in the wintertime, be careful when you get out and drive on it. It's very easy to navigate on those types of roads if you know what you're doing. I grew up in Colorado, and we had lots of snow. Snow in Colorado is generally very different than snow in Pennsylvania. Snow in Colorado is very dry and powdery compared to snow in Pennsylvania. And that's why skiing out there in the winter is so good. In Pennsylvania, it's a much wetter snow. And then when the temperature drops, it can freeze and become very icy. So quantity of snow is different and can influence how much ice you'll end up with. So do be careful if you've never driven on it. But don't be afraid of trying it. People drive on it all the time and are quite successful. The cruise. Several months ago, my husband and I were talking about places we'd like to go and things we'd like to do. He made the offhanded comment that he had no interest in going on a cruise. I asked him if he really meant it, and he said he did. To him, it would just be like being in a mall with a whole lot of people, and it would just be something he wouldn't enjoy. I said to him that I had always wanted to go on one, at least one time, just to experience it and see if it was something I'd like to do. My sister had asked me several years ago if my husband and I would be interested in going on a cruise with her and her husband to Alaska. I said before, any of us ventured, I said before, any of us ventured out on a cruise that long, one of us needed to try something shorter to see if we really liked the concept of a cruise. So as my husband and I sat talking that day about his not wanting to go on a cruise, I said, I'd really like to do this. I think I'll call one of the girls. You see, we have our 4 daughters. I said, I think I'll ask one of the girls if they'd like to go with me and plan a year from summer to go. I called the first daughter in Jacksonville. She's been on a cruise. I was trying to think if she's gone once or twice. But she's gone once, and to Europe twice. So I called her and said, I'm really thinking of going on a cruise next summer, and I was wondering if any of you girls would like to go. She said definitely. She talked about how much fun she had when she went and said to count her in. I called another one of the girls and asked, would you like to go on a cruise? Your sister and I are going. Yes, she wanted to go too. Well, to make a long story short, all 4 of our daughters decided that they would like to go. Then, one of them said that we needed to include our aunt, who's from Mexico, because she's such a delightful person that they thought she'd have fun with us. The end.